Hello, and welcome to another webcast brought to you by Digital Dimensions. I'll be your host, Joseph Richter. With this webcast, I'm kicking off the SOLIDWORKS Drawings series. This episode titled Foundation. It's about the setup, the templates, your parametric notes, and dimensions. The topics I'm going to cover today are planning. You want to start with the end in mind. That way all your documentation communicates accurately. I'll walk you through setting up the drawing templates. I'll show you how to link parametric annotations to file properties or dimensions. I'll take you through adding dimensions using the inserted model items, using the smart dimensions, or pulling in your DimExpert dimensions. And then we'll talk about the system properties. When I say system properties, I'm referring to each workstation. Each workstation has its unique settings that if everybody in your work group is going to produce the same drawings, then you want to make sure that their workstation settings are the same. One item that comes to mind specifically is the file locations for your templates. There is a utility that will allow us to make sure that all of our workstations match. This is referred to as the copy settings wizard. And then after we go through all of this, most of you already have data that might not have been set up correctly, in which case I want to talk about your legacy data. After you learn these tricks, you're going to want to go back and reapply this stuff to the files you already have. There are a couple tools that help automate this. We have the Task Scheduler and the SOLIDWORKS Design Checker. So for planning, when coming up with a plan, you want to decide which information you want to display on the drawing. Things like who drew it, who checked it, when you drew it, the revision, maybe the description, maybe even special notes that apply to specific parts. In order to make sure all this stuff works, you need to make sure that the part and the assembly contain the necessary information that you want to display on the drawing, which also means that we need to be thinking about our part templates and our drawing templates at the same time, along with our assembly templates. And when figuring these templates out, we need to decide, does it go in the part, the assembly, or the drawing? An example of something that belongs to the part would be the material that the part is made out of. On the other hand, an example of something that would be stored at the assembly would be how much does this assembly weigh? Or an example of something that would be controlled only from the drawing would be things like the revision. When coming up with a plan for how you want your templates to behave, you want to have your documentation workflow in mind. That way you can accommodate it as much as possible, having all the information up front. It's always harder to go back later and try to implement this stuff later on in the game. If you can have your ideas up front, you always want to set them up and test them, make sure they're working, and then implement. And as long as you have all your requirements for your templates, it will join with your document. This should make it easy to incorporate your new templates and files into your documentation requirements. Okay, so once you have the plan figured out, move on to setup. When we came out to your facility to give you a demonstration of SOLIDWORKS, we most likely showed you a part and an assembly, and when we made a drawing, it looked like it created itself. That's simply because we knew exactly what SOLIDWORKS was looking to do, and we had all the information filled out ahead of time. The goal of this webcast is to show you how this stuff works, so that way you'll be able to do that as well. The information I'm talking about, of course, is the file properties. They need to be in the appropriate parts, the appropriate assemblies, and the appropriate drawings to pull into the drawing. One of the keys to setting these templates up is to understand the anatomy of a SOLIDWORKS drawing. It's important to point out that the drawing is actually made up of two templates. Your sheet, which would be the blank paper that contains things like your file properties, your document properties, and any predefined views. The file extension for this blank page is DRW-DOT. The second template involved here is the sheet format, otherwise known as the title block. It contains lines, notes, maybe a company logo in a JPEG, GIF, TIFF format, and the file extension for this is SLDDRT. In order to save a title block from the file pull down, it's Save Sheet format. And with that, I want to take us into SOLIDWORKS and show how this works. So back over here in SOLIDWORKS, you'll notice that I've got 3 rectangles drawn up, complete with hatching. This larger rectangle represents my drawing file, and I did this with hatching to illustrate that this drawing file is actually made up of these 2 templates. The sheet template, which has this blue cross hatching going to the upper left, and this sheet format or title block template, which has the hatch going to the upper right. So in the background here we can see the hatch crisscrossing. I also tried to use colors to illustrate this. You can see blue and yellow make green. When you start a new drawing in SOLIDWORKS, when you open a new drawing, the first question it asks is which template would you like to use. I've got 4 templates here. 3 of these are merged templates. That is, they have the title blocks pasted right on top of the blank page. This is inappropriate for most cases. Your drawing should behave like this one, the blank page. So when I hit OK, it says, okay, which title block would you like to use? While it might have seemed more efficient to have had the title block on here beforehand, you want to minimize the number of blank page templates that you have, so that way you have more consistency among your drawings. This blank page template contains the document properties, that is the detailing standard, how big your arrows are, which annotation fonts to utilize, how to treat your dimensions. You can see that there's hundreds of settings here that could be different among any given drawing, so if you have multiple blank page templates, these could be all over the board. The other thing that this document contains are the file properties. Things like the description, maybe the revision, who drew it, the other thing that this blank page template can contain are your predefined views. So as I drop in my drawing view of predefined, just like it sounds, a predefined view means that you tell it what orientation it's going to have before you use it with an actual part. Here I want to specify it's going to be a front view, or I could say top, right, or ISO view. In this case I'm going to do a front view. And from this predefined view I can project it. So I can project one there and there. Maybe if I want an ISO view I can project it there as well. Now in order to use a template with a predefined view, you've got 2 options. Number 1, you can come over to your File Explorer and drag and drop in a part like this here. And you can see that it populates those views quite nicely. The other way to do this is when you have a part open, and from the file pull down you specify make drawing from part. If that template has predefined views, it will fill them out just like this. If you had a drawing without a title block on it, you just need to right click, go into properties, and specify your title block. Maybe I want a standard sheet format, do a landscape. And clearly it doesn't fit, but this is a good example. Sometimes you're making a drawing and you run out of room. You don't really want to change the scale, but instead you want to change the paper. Right click in the background and go to properties. Again, because it's 2 templates, the title block is just a frame, if you will, that you put around the rest of your drawing. As I zoom in here, you'll notice that drawn has got my name put in here. So here's where we'll transition over to the sheet format. In order to be editing the sheet format or the title block, you right click on the background and specify Edit Sheet Format. Inside of here, I can see that there's a note for drawn by. In fact, there's a note for the date. It's not showing up currently, so in order to see the properties that are in here, if I go to the View pull down, I can specify Annotation Link Errors, and now every note that has a link that is incomplete or no data found for it, it's going to give you an error flag. If I double click on this here, it's looking for the company name. This one here is looking for a description. This one here is looking for the drawn date. So a lot of these are linked directly to this specific drawing. So if I go into File Properties, I can fill out the drawn date. And I'll just make it January 1st of 2009. And when I take a look at that, there's my date. Likewise, I can fill out the company name. However, not all the file properties will be from the drawing. So as I edit the sheet on this, I'm going to instead go into my part and go into my file properties here and add something, maybe like my material. Now with material, you can see that I have material in the tree here. I could actually link it directly to that material, and here it's going to pull in material not specified because I haven't specified a material yet. Maybe I want my weight, which will be linked to the mass, and we'll go ahead and throw a description in here. I'll just call this one pattern. Now when I transition back to the drawing, I can see that my description went under the title. You'll notice that drawing number is linked actually to the part file name. I can see that my material is still not specified, but it's pulling that from the tree. And to illustrate that, I'll go ahead and give it a material. There's my 1060 alloy. And then over here for the weight, it's giving me a readout. And those errors are kind of getting in the way, so I'll turn that off. There's my weight for this part. Additional things that might go in the title block, so I edit sheet format. If I right click, I have the ability to set an anchor for my general tables, my bill of materials, my whole tables, my weldment cut lists, or my revision tables. So any point within this title block can be set as an anchor for something. The other things that this sheet format contains are lines that make up the title block. So far we've talked about the patterns. So far we've talked about the notes, the lines, and the table anchors. Next would be a company logo, let's say, in which case I can insert a picture, and it lets me grab bitmaps, GIFs, JPEGs, etc. I can then specify how big and where. Maybe I'll put that one right about there. I can also, if I added one more file property, maybe add a custom property, and maybe I'll fill out a revision. We'll make this A. I can see my revision shows up here, and in order to show my custom property, I'll just drop one in here and link it to the current document, and here's my custom property, which should just be value, and there it is. Again, these notes that we link to properties are called parametric notes. You want to decide where the file properties should come from. I'm going to edit sheet to get back out of this. So whether it's from the part, that is the title from the part, the material, or the weight from the part, or whether it's the revision driven from the drawing. And this is when we were talking about planning, you need to decide where each piece of information comes from. So for review, I'm going to go ahead and open my sheet template example. The sheet template is the blank page. It contains your document property settings, the file properties, your sheet properties, like the scale and what type of projection to use. And in order to save a drawing template, it's File, Save As, and from the drop down here, do a drawing template, DRW-DOT. Again, these drawing templates can be saved with or without a title block. It's highly recommended that you save it without that sheet format or title block. And of course, it contains your predefined views. Talk about the sheet format or the title block. Okay, this title block is going to contain your standard notes and annotations, any company logos, your parametric notes, i.e. pulling in file properties from the part, the assembly, or the drawing, border lines, again, and your table anchors. Any point within the title block, again, can be set as an anchor for one of these other tables. In order to save just the title block or sheet format from the file pull down, save sheet format, and it will save as an SLD DRT. And with that, we'll go back into the slideshow. As we continue on with the presentation, and I leave SOLIDWORKS file templates, best practice states to have a protected backup of your master templates. It takes a while to figure out which file properties populate the title block, which assembly properties are going to populate the title block, and finally which drawing file properties are going to populate the title block. So after you figure that all out, you want to protect your time by, like I said, putting a copy of these templates either in your PDMWorks vault on the server or burning it to a CD or a DVD, some read-only format that nobody will mess with. Annotations and dimensions. I just showed how to write a note and point it at a file property coming from the drawing. Now, as I was doing that, this link to property dialog box actually has three other areas to pull from. Either the current document, which would be the drawing, the model and view to which the annotation is attached, which would be the drawing view that is highlighted when you're dropping a note. That note now belongs to that drawing view, and whatever model is contained in there, be it a part or an assembly, that's the properties that that note will pull from. Model and view specified in the sheet properties, this is what the entire drawing is of. By default, that's the first view dropped into the drawing. And finally, component to which the annotation is attached. This one would be a note with a leader touching a part, and that part, it's able to pull the properties from that specific part. So these annotations can be linked to the file properties or SOLIDWORKS variables. Additionally, if you have dimensions on your drawing, you can click on a dimension and it will parametrically link to that model dimension. So if you're trying to write a note and you need to have a specific length or callout on there, if you click on the callout, it'll populate it in your notes. And I want to demonstrate this in SOLIDWORKS. To better explain the parametric annotations, I'm going to open an example that I've prepared to show this. I usually do this in my Essentials class. And from here, you can see I've got a drawing. It contains a part view and an assembly view. To make sure that this explanation goes smoothly, I'll go ahead and open the part. And within the part file here, if I look at the properties, I can see that it has a description and one custom part property that's linked to the custom part value. Now I name this property specific so that way you know where the property is coming from, and then the value specific to where it's coming from as well. And then I'm going to go and open the assembly here and take a look at its properties. And here the assembly, I've got a description of the assembly, and I've got custom assembly properties 1 and 2. Therefore I have values 1 and 2, and I'm pulling in the weight of the assembly. And back here at the drawing, if I go to my file properties here, I can see that I've got one custom drawing property and is pulling in the custom drawing value. Now, here I've got the same dialog box that when we're throwing in a note and I say link to property, gives me these 4 areas. You'll notice a few of them are grayed out. That's because they're not available at the current time. So for that, I'll cancel that. So here's the dialog box. This first note is pointing at the current document. Okay, so this one is linked to the current, or rather, linked to the current document, which is the drawing. So as I double click to edit this, you can see that it's linked to the custom drawing property. I typed all that in, and equals, here's where SOLIDWORKS takes over and adds the parametric portion of this note. $PRP : in parentheses custom drawing property. Hence it's pulling the custom drawing value. The second one here, model in view to which the annotation is attached. Now for this one, whatever drawing view is active when you make a note, for example, if I made a note here, this view border is highlighted, so that's the view it'll belong to. If I were to do that over here, it would belong to the part view down here. So I made a note on this view here, and since this view here contains a copy or the model that is the assembly, it's able to pull the assembly properties forward. So here it's linked to the custom assembly property, which happens to be the custom assembly value. Third one down, model and view specified in the sheet properties. Now this note, as I follow the arrow over, linked to custom assembly property number 2, but to show you how I arrived there, I'm going to follow my thing around here. And here it says, use the custom properties from the model shown in which drawing view. Now, this sheet properties dialog is when you right-click on the sheet and go to properties. And inside of here on the bottom, use custom properties from the value shown in. Currently I'm using the assembly drawing view. I name these drawing views so that way it would be easy to explain. Here I can see part drawing view, and there's my assembly drawing view. If I said part drawing view instead, I'm actually changing the focus of the entire drawing. So when I hit OK, and when I look at my note here, links to do a rebuild here, my note is broken because it's looking for the custom assembly property. The part does not have a custom assembly property, therefore it goes in error. And to kind of illustrate that, if I go to my errors here from the view pull down, okay, this error says I can't find a custom assembly property. So let me go back and turn the errors off. And now when I come down to my title block, it's showing the part description. If I change this back to the assembly and hit rebuild, now it'll pull the description from the assembly. So by default, or most notes I should say, are linked directly to the model and view specified, and that's usually where people stop reading, and that's fine because 90% of the time the first drawing view you drop on there is the one that the drawing is of anyhow. But here I'm showing you the control of being able to go into the sheet properties and say, no, this drawing is not of the assembly, but instead the part. And then hit rebuild, and then it updates to that drawing view. I'm going to leave this as the assembly drawing view. The last one, component to which the annotation is attached. Okay, this is the one where the leader is reaching out and touching the part. Even though this view contains the assembly, I'm able to specify this part here. This is what I want to find out about. And therefore, when I double click on here, I can see it is linked to the model custom part property. The model in this case is the part. Each one of these has a different $PRP sheet, that is from the sheet properties. This one, PRP model, is from the model it's touching. And the view one is also PRP sheet. I think SOLIDWORKS makes the identifier on the pointers of what from the sheet. Is it the view on the sheet or is it the sheet properties? All the other ones, like the drawing itself, is just $PRP. While I'm on a roll here, I want to do a demonstration on this same model set. So if I open the part and do a file property here, I'm going to say example from part. This is from the part. From the assembly. File properties. Assembly example. And then finally from the drawing. I add a note. If I specify from the current document, I'm going to get custom drawing property or example from drawing. That one not, oh, here we are, drawing example. If I did model and view specified, this is going to be from the assembly. Here's my assembly example. So, assembly example, edit that link from the current document, drawing example, or from the part. Now, because this drawing is of the assembly, and here again we can see this under which drawing view, by default it's grabbing the assembly. So the only way to get to the part information is to have this view active when I make a note. And model in view to which the annotation is attached. Now I can pull the part information. Here's the example from the part. Likewise, if I add a note touching the part, I could say component to which this annotation is attached, and here I can specify the example from the part as well. And with that, we'll go in and take a look at how we add some dimensions to our drawing. I'm going to go ahead and open another file, and this one's going to be the idler arm. Now, when I did my design planning webcast, I made mention that you want to plan out your datum structure. And if done successfully, you'll be able to reuse those dimensions that you had in the model at the drawing. So when we showed up and gave you this demonstration of SOLIDWORKS for the first time, we said drawing creation is automatic. Well, we weren't trying to fool you. It's just that we knew how to set the models up, how to plan out our datum structure, and how to bring those dimensions into the drawing. So not all the models will have the proper datum scheme. If I take a look here, the annotations on this part, some are valid, some are not. Okay, but basically all these dimensions can be brought into my drawing. If I do make drawing from part, specify my template, maybe I want a B landscape for this thing. The view palette opens up and it has a couple different options. If I leave the options as is, it's going to import the annotations, which are the dimensions, from the model. I'm going to go ahead and uncheck this because I want to do this manually. Now, when I bring in the front view, it'll then take me straight into projection mode. I'll go ahead and throw a few on here, and then hit OK on that. I'll be covering drawing views more in depth in another webcast, but for this here, to bring in the dimensions for this part, the insert pull down, model items, or from the annotations toolbar, model items. Please select the type of model item you want to bring in, then click on it in the graphics display to bring it in. Now what they're referring to is any dimensions that are done at the model that were marked for the drawing can be brought in. Any dimensions that were not marked for the drawing can be brought in. Instant count, revolution counts of patterns, the whole wizard profiles, whole wizard locations, or whole callouts can all be brought in from the model. Any annotations made at the model, be it a note, a surface finish, GD&T symbols, any datums, any datum targets, or any weld symbols can also be brought in from the model. So what this area should be telling you is that all these annotations and dimensions should be put in at the model itself. If you do that, not only will your drawings be easier to make, but you'll be ready for ASME 14.41, which is the ANSI standard that states you don't need a drawing, just the 3D model has all the information to manufacture this part, therefore it's valid. I'm only going to do the marked for drawing option, and then when I start clicking in the graphics display area, it's going to bring in the dimensions for that extrude. Click down here, it brings in the dimensions for that extrude, and so on. Now the reason it's grabbing just selected feature, or why that's an option, is because if you have a really large model, you can get inundated or flooded with a ton of annotations all at once. So to kind of demonstrate that, I'll say entire model. When I hit OK, let me try that again. Model items, entire model, hit OK, there we go. got more this time around. This one's not too bad, but if you have a fairly complex part, it can get bad. Now, by default, SOLIDWORKS might not drop the annotation or the dimension in the view that you want to display it. For example, this width here. Okay, it's kind of confusing. I think it's talking about this diameter up top, in which case this drawing view is the wrong view to show that. If you hold the Shift button down on the keyboard, you can drag these dimensions, and if it gives you the not symbol, it means it will not move it into the page here. But if I drop it on this drawing view, it will go ahead and throw it on that diameter. I'll go ahead and pull it off here. And I probably want this to be as a diameter dimension. There we go. One of the things you'll notice is that these dimensions have a straight line to them instead of the bent leader. This is actually a standard, ISO standard. This is a common tech call, so I figured I'd mention it as I ran into it here. That's a document property setting. So this would be at your drawing templates. As long as this is ANSI, then the dimensions will look the way that you're more familiar with. So again, to drag and drop a dimension from view to view, hold the Shift button down, grab your dimension, and then move it to the other drawing view. So here's my 2-inch width. If I want to copy a dimension from one view to another, it's Control drag. So maybe I want to reference this width in both places. Control on the keyboard, drag it, watch the not symbol. It will not drop it here, but if I drop it up here, here's my width again. Now keep in mind, if you do copy dimensions, this is what we call a double dimension drawing. In other words, it's violating ANSI standards. If you're going to do this, you want to set one of these to reference simply by displaying the parentheses. And now we're compliant with ANSI 14.5 in that this is the driving dimension, this is driven. Now, the reason I picked this model is it's also a good example for dimensions that were not fully captured within the design annotations. For example, the overall height here to down here. If I needed that dimension on my drawing and it wasn't part of the model items, I can add a smart dimension, and with the smart dimension I can grab that. And to grab the quadrant down here, if you hold the Shift button down, it'll snap to the nearest quadrant that you're closest to. And once you drop that in there, there's my overall. One thing you'll notice about dimensions is that the black dimensions, these are model dimensions. Because they came from the model itself, I can double click on any one of these and modify that dimension. And when I hit rebuild, I can see the result of that modification. In this case, I blew up the fillet, so it disappeared. If I hit cancel, it'll restore the original value and bring it back. The other way to dimension to a quadrant, if I go top to this, before I held the Shift button to grab the bottom here, but here I'm just going to dimension edge to arc. Once I place the dimension, if I go into my Leaders tab, I have the ability to set my arc condition, and in this case it's going to be maximum. When adding dimensions, you can come into the dimension and set a tolerance for it. So here's another reason to use the dimensions from the model itself. While you're designing the model, you can pick out or decide on the tolerance you want. You can come in here and assign a bilateral tolerance, say maybe plus or minus 10. And if I go back to the part, there we go. I can find that 1-inch dimension with the tolerance hanging off of it. And it looks like it's right here, buried in the model sort of. But here again, if I took this dimension and I went back in and I want to specify a tolerance for that, let's say limit. I'll also go plus or minus 10 here. Now when I go back to the drawing, that dimension will change to that there. And so here's that dimension. So parametric changes, that's the reason to do it this way. I double click, I can update the model from the drawing. If I change at the part, it updates the drawing. If I do something like a reference dimension at the drawing level, when I double click on it, it does nothing because it's a reference dimension. Wherein I double click on a live dimension, it's going to allow me to modify it. The last example I have here for adding dimensions to the part, or to the drawing rather, from another file. The Dim Expert. New in SOLIDWORKS 2008, they introduced the Dimension Expert. That's this tab at the top of the tree. And what this allows you to do is take a part like an imported blob, an IGES or a parasolid, and go ahead and give it meaningful dimensions based on a datum structure. The other use for this would be a hack model that there was not good design intent planned out for it. Therefore, the dimensions that exist already are pretty much garbage as it relates to the drawing. So in order to reuse these Dim Expert dimensions, you make a drawing from the part. This time I'll go with a B size, and I'll go ahead and pull in the front view. And I want it to import the annotations. I don't have any design annotations, but I need Dim Expert annotations. As I pull this thing in here, it's going to go ahead and pull in those Dim Expert dimensions. That on all these views here. This is one step better than redimensioning the part with the Smart Dimension tool because of the fact that I can move these dimensions from view to view. If I hold the Shift key down, I can drag it just like a model item, or I can hold Control down on the keyboard and copy that dimension from view to view. So a little bit better than Smart Dimensions. Kind of gives the advantage of auto dimension, as you guys have seen before with Smart Dimension. Auto dimension lets you pick out your datum structure, in which case you'd pick your two edges and then it would just auto dimension that view. This Dim Expert Dimensions allows you to do it at the model and have a little bit of parametrics from the model to the drawing. Now keep in mind these dimensions are still read-only like your Smart Dimensions done at the drawing, in which case you can't double click and change anything. Likewise, adding a note in here will not transfer back over to the part, but here again it does allow you to move those dimensions from view to view. Okay, and then to wrap up the notes, I want to show back on this drawing here, if I do have a note and I want to call out maybe the diameter of the top, okay, I can just simply click on a dimension and it'll pull in that dimension. So if that dimension changes, simply hit rebuild, the model updates, and so too does my parametric note. And with that, we'll get back into the slideshow. After you get all your templates figured out, get everybody on the same page using their model items or their Dim Expert dimensions, or simply by settling on auto dimension for the part at the drawing, the next concern is when generating new drawings is the system properties. That is the per workstation settings. They should all match because there are a few items that will change how the drawing looks based on the workstation. And a good example of this is the tangent edges in a brand new drawing view. This is a per workstation setting. In addition to this, you've got your file locations. That is where you're storing your document templates. Ideally, you want to have all your templates up on a network, and this file location pointer allows you to tell each workstation you need to get all your templates from this network location. aside from document templates, we can point at bill of material templates as it relates to the drawings, revision table templates, revision templates, sheet format templates, weldment cut list templates, and many more. In order to automate how the settings are populated from one workstation to another, other than taking screenshots of each section of the system options dialog box, very time consuming, there is a copy settings wizard, and that basically copies the registry settings from your computer and allows you to populate it on other workstations. Another good use of this tool is if you have multiple computers, be it a laptop and a desktop, you can make sure that your settings populate, and therefore when you jump back into SOLIDWORKS, it'll be just the way you left it on the other computer, that is. So let's go back into SOLIDWORKS and take a look at this. So to take a look at some of these system options from the tools, pull down its options. And System Options tab, these are settings that are unique to your computer or the workstation. The ones that we're interested in looking at are the drawings settings. So things like eliminating duplicate model dimensions on insert. That is, when you do insert model items, it'll eliminate the duplicates. It's kind of like an override here. The ones that I want to point out specifically that will have the most impact is under display style. So tangent edges and new views. Currently it's set to visible. If I wanted everybody to have use font or removed, I would need to make sure that that workstation is set that way. That's not to say that we can't override the view once we get there, but at least this way everybody will start the same way. Likewise, the display style for new views, we could have it hidden lines removed. That's the default right now based on these templates. I could have shaded with edges, in which case all my drawing views would be shaded. And of course the most important one, file locations. Here I can specify where all my document templates are located. Simply add the location. And then delete the locations you don't want. And then from the pull down here you can see that there's a bunch of other areas you can point out. So for your bill of material templates, you can add a location for that. And since there is a lot of stuff to point at, this might take a while. So doc templates, this would cover your part templates, your assembly templates, and your drawing templates. That is the sheet template. For the title block or the sheet format template, this is actually a separate path, sheet formats. And then for your table templates, like weldment cut lists here, revision table templates here. Once I have all those settings dialed in the way I want them, you would close out of SOLIDWORKS and then launch the Copy Settings wizard. I'm going to go ahead and leave SOLIDWORKS on. It'll warn me, but under Programs for SOLIDWORKS, you can go into SOLIDWORKS Tools, and here's my Copy Settings wizard. And this Copy Settings wizard allows me to save my settings. Here it's warning me that SOLIDWORKS is currently running, therefore any of the settings that I made this time around will not be included. So to do this properly, you want to exit out of SOLIDWORKS after making all the changes and then run this. So I'm going to go ahead and continue. The items that it saves out are your keyboard shortcuts. That is anything you've customized to the keyboard. Your menu customizations, that is when you right click on something and you have the items showing up. By default you can turn off what does show up right away or turn on everything, etc. Your system options, okay, this is the one that I'm talking about. File locations, how to treat tangent edges, etc. And then the one that most people like, the toolbar layout. Once you get your interface looking the way you want it, you pretty much want to get used to that layout and use it every time. So there's how you would do that. It is asking me where I want to save my settings. You simply browse for wherever you want to use it, and then to restore settings, just use the Restore Settings button, hit Next, and then browse for the file to restore. Now, upon restoring, you do have the option to bring in all the keyboard shortcuts, the menu customization, system options, or toolbar customization. You have the right to turn that off too. So in other words, if you don't want Bob's keyboard shortcuts but he's got everything else, you can restore from his file, uncheck keyboard, and leave the other three on, and then when you restore it, you'll get those three items, not the keyboards. Which also means that when you are saving out your settings, make sure you save all four areas out, and then you can pick and choose what you restore. I'm going to go ahead and cancel this. Now that I've shown you a little bit about how drawing templates are integrated with your sheet format templates and how your part templates and your assembly template should all match, you probably have a bunch of data that is not yet set up that way. So here I want to show you a couple of tools to help you get them in line with one another. The primary focus of all this parametric data is the file properties. In order to take the file properties from one part or one assembly or one drawing and moving it to another part, another assembly, or another drawing is a matter of copy paste. The reason though that I want to talk about it is it's a little tricky. It looks like it doesn't work, but then you got to keep going until you realize that it is working. Or if you've got lots and lots of files, maybe you should use the SOLIDWORKS task scheduler, in which case you can automate which properties are going to be populated into which folder containing which documents. Additionally, if everybody was using their own templates on their own workstation because you didn't know about file locations yet, the SOLIDWORKS Design Checker is the utility that will check the current drawing based on a known good template settings, and with that we could have it correct the drawing as you step through it. This can also be automated using the SOLIDWORKS task scheduler. So let me go over into SOLIDWORKS and show you this. Okay, so I'm going to go into Tools Options here and make a few changes. My document properties, I'm going to go ahead and change this to JIS. Maybe I'll change my units to millimeter gram second. And let's say this was my good template. In order to copy these settings so I can check other documents with it, I need to add in the design checker. This design checker, by the way, is a part of SOLIDWORKS Office Pro. And from design checker, I'm going to go ahead and learn checks based on this known good template. And for the document check, I'll look for the dimensioning standard. I also want to check the units. Maybe a few other items. Once I'm done, SOLIDWORKS will launch the design checker. And right away I can see my JIS standard. I can see the units set to millimeter gram second, as well as any of the other items that I requested. So I might want to save this, and I'll call this JIS. And now to use this, I go back to SOLIDWORKS. And from within here, I go to another document. Looks like I got a few things open to use. And then from here, I use the design checker to check the active document. And I need to add the standard file to use for this. And I called it JIS. When I hit validate, SOLIDWORKS will check the current document on the standards file that I had, and it looks like it passed one check, the rest failed. So here's a look at the document dimensioning standard. I'm going to stretch this out a little bit so we can see this. It found ANSI. I want it to be GIS, so to correct it, I click on GIS, update values, and that will replace ANSI with GIS. I go on down the line. I want my units to be that, update values, like that, and then when I hit update again, it's going to run the check again on this document. In order to automate this on a bunch of files, you go ahead and use the SOLIDWORKS Task Scheduler. So SOLIDWORKS Tools, same place I found the Copy Settings Wizard. I've got the SOLIDWORKS Task Scheduler. And then from here, I want to utilize Design Checker. And from here, I can specify which standard file to check on. And which folder of documents to check, either file or folder. Additionally, I was talking about custom properties. In order to populate multiple parts with specific file properties, we just utilize update custom properties. You type in your properties here. Oh, first you add your folder. And then when I hit next, I can specify the properties. Tell it what type this property is. And then the expected value. Now when you input a value here, it's going to overwrite anything that's already there. So this one's a little bit dangerous, but it will stamp all your files. This is best used in a case where you have no file properties at all. You've discovered you want some, you fill them all out here, and then stamp all your files. A better way to do this if you're using PDMWorks is to set your vault up to control file properties. That way, when you check in the document, it'll stamp all the missing file properties onto that document being checked in. And then the last thing I want to cover here before we wrap it up is on a per file basis. If I look at the file properties here, you can see that I've got 3 file properties. If I wanted to copy these to another document, you need to click and hold down on the mouse and drag so it highlights these 3 items. And then you use the Control C for Control Copy. Then you go to the file you want to apply these to. I'll go to the other drawing. And when I go to File Properties here, there is no properties. So I click on the first row, hit Control V for paste. And here's why it's a little tricky. It looks like it didn't really work all the way, but what I need to do is click in the value area and then hit Enter. Then it brings in row 2. I can click down here or hit the down key on the keyboard and hit Enter again, and then that other value comes in. So if you've got 20 properties, this might take a few seconds while you're hitting down, enter, but this can be employed more effectively than the automated way through the task scheduler, because this is on a as needed basis. Maybe half your files have half your properties. Well, you don't really want to run that through task scheduler, otherwise it'll blank out any files that have those properties already but happen to be in the folder that you were checking it on. So that could be a little dangerous. This, although slower, does work just as good. And with that, we'll finish out with the slideshow. Thanks again for joining us for a Digital Dimensions webcast. We look forward to seeing you in future webcasts. And keep in mind, there's a ton of stuff to learn about SOLIDWORKS, so don't let this webcast discourage you from attending an actual training course. We've got a lot to offer, and so does SOLIDWORKS. And with SOLIDWORKS 2009 right around the corner, there's going to be a bunch of new stuff to learn. So I look forward to seeing you in my class. I'm your host, Joseph Richter. I hope to see you next time. Take care. Goodbye.